everyone, my name's Alex.
And this is Tom.
And welcome to the Pop-Up Podcast. This year's been a bit naff, hasn't it, Tom?
Yeah, I don't think 21 is the year for anything at the moment, especially any festivals as well as films.
Yeah, the film industry's taken a bit of a hit, hasn't it? Like, lots of delays and lots of productions being postponed, which is a real shame.
I know, it's all gone onto a digital platform now.
You got HBO Max, you got Disney, you got like all of these new platforms just like rising out of nowhere. And like, I mean, you look at like, HBO Max, they've got this Justice League film coming out. It'll probably be out by the time we release this.
How long it takes.
Yeah. We got the Disney Plus with like, Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like they're really they're taking the place of what cinemas used to be, which not necessarily a good or bad thing, but it is the new norm.
Do you think cinemas will still be around, or do you think this is it?
Nah, cinemas will never die.
Speaking of cinemas, isn't there a new Lord of the Rings TV show getting produced?
Yeah, I've seen Amazon Prime. They're going ahead and making a series. I think it's in production at the minute. Actually, they're really pretty cool by the sounds of it. Like, I mean, lots of buzz around it at the minute. There's no trailers or anything out yet, but people are really excited for that show.
Sure they are.
Yeah.
I'm ready for it.
Aren't we all?
As long as it doesn't... it needs to come in 2021. Otherwise, there's what am I waiting for? Just sleep.
It's a shame that a lot of things have been postponed like this, like in the last year, and delayed and whatnot. But that's not what we're here to chat about. We want to talk about the the positives and the old stories that we've all had from working in the industry. Chatting to as many people as we can. Anyone from the film and television industry all the way through to like music and games. Like, we just want to chat to these people. And anyway, enough of us. Like, we've had enough of us.
We've talked too much already.
Okay, so now on to our actual first ever guest on the podcast. Please welcome Stephen Hunter. Hello, Stephen.
G'day, guys. How are you? Thank you. First guest that I feel very special.
Yeah, we're the honoured ones. So, how have you been?
Really good. Like, we're I should be asking you guys this because we're in Australia and Sydney in particular, and the state I live in, New South Wales, I believe has probably managed this whole thing better than most. Apart from when it first all blew up and we had like a whole cruise ship full of coronavirus positive people turn up. Yeah. Well, I think we had we've had no lockdowns. So, there's been a few outbreaks, but they've just managed to contain it locally, as opposed to what's happening in my home country of New Zealand. A couple of people get it and they lock the whole country down. So, they've all got their different ways, and it's even different because it feels like Australia is like 5 different countries at the moment. We've got New South Wales, we've got Victoria, we've got South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland, Northern Territory, and ACT. And so there's been border restrictions all the way through. If someone gets a case, they close the borders internally. So it's like living. So it's been hard for tourism and stuff. But, what it's meant is that over here, especially New South Wales, everyone's been travelling within their own state. We've been out of, I guess, lockdown for quite a while. Last year I did like a couple of movies and a couple of TV shows. So, work's been going good. So, I think we've managed pretty well. Considering, and work's going pretty good. So, yeah.
It's considerably better than we're doing over here. I mean, we're still stuck in lockdown. I'm set up in Birmingham and Tom's he's in Guernsey. Guernsey's a lot better than it is in England, but it's a bit naff on our end, not going to lie.
I've got a mate in Sydney who has actually lived in Guernsey for a while. So, I mean, you guys basically you just generally self-isolate as a rule, don't you? I mean, that's...
Yeah, we don't even talk to anyone. Really? So it's like, what? UK exists? And telling people where you're from is not always the easiest thing. But yeah, we haven't had lockdown really at all. It's pretty much the same as your area, Stephen. It was only 3 weeks ago, we had an outbreak also with the new virus, so they put us back in lockdown but yeah, we're coming out of it next week. So they just lock it down, and then after 3 weeks, they'll reopen it. Whereas the UK is like 1 case, back to straight into lockdown. So I do not envy the UK people whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's been good, and I think the UK sort of also, like as a nation and politically as well, the UK has benefited from having America, because usually everyone would be looking at the UK, what's happening there, and Boris Johnson, and just like laughing. But now they're going, well, at least it's not what those guys are doing. At least it's better than America. So I'm sure Johnson's loving that. He's got someone that is more like a 5-year-old child than himself. So I mean. We can't talk. We've got Smuggy the Bear running our country over here, so he doesn't do anything really apart from talk and riddles. So but I think generally speaking, it's good, and I think we've found when we had to homeschool, and that was the biggest thing. But we only had 9 weeks of homeschooling. Melbourne had like 25 to 30 weeks of homeschooling. And I've got a 10-year-old, and that was a bit challenging. But what we would get out into nature, and long as it was just us exercising, we could go outside, and our whole street managed to, we had a weekly newsletter, and I don't know, there was kind of this shift that happened where everyone was, because they couldn't go indoors anywhere, everyone was going outdoors. They were being out in nature, going on sort of walks, exercising, getting to know your neighbours. And I don't know, a lot of stuff has sort of really shifted. So, and, humans we're pretty adaptable, I think we've managed to get around it. No one would have heard the word Zoom fatigue 12 months ago, whereas that's happening. Zoom's happened, and a lot of people. And I know a lot of people on my street who they haven't gone into their offices, let's say the Sydney CBD, and it's busier now, but a lot of them are like, I'm not going to go back 5 days a week now. I'll do 2 days a week, because suddenly they can have breakfast with their children. And, so it's there's a whole lot of stuff that I think happened that will never go back to what it was, which is, some of it's bad, but a lot of it is really good, I think.
It's true. How had COVID affected work, especially when it first started? Like how was it in terms of because obviously sets got a little bit more intense with the health and safety protocols and whatnot?
Well, at the very start, I was doing a TV show called Wakefield. I was on ABC, and that got shut down. So, there was like another 2 weeks to film, and that got shut down. I was also due to do a movie in Brisbane with Jane Seymour, and that was meant to be in Brisbane, and that got delayed. And then there was this other crazy movie. It's Children of the Corn, and it's it's not really a remake, because I think if anything, it's just another adaptation of a short story, of the Stephen King short story. And if anything, it's possibly a prequel in the timeline of the other movies, but it's not related. And that was an American film directed by a guy called Kurt Wimmer, who wrote the original Point Break, and he wrote Law-Abiding Citizen, that Jared Butler one where he just blows shit up the whole time, and people. And anyway, I auditioned for that, and I auditioned for a couple of roles, and then had recalls, and then this COVID broke out. And we thought, well, that's stuffed. But then they kept going, and then we ended up just out of Sydney in a place called Richmond, and we started filming, and they did like 2 or 3 weeks, and it was all outside because they grew all this corn. Obviously that's the movie. And I thought, well, once they do the outside stuff, that'll be it. But they carried on, and then things started to get a bit better, and we ended up going out to Mudgee, which is in central New South Wales, and we filmed some stuff like in a big hall, and and they actually got the whole movie completed, which was kind of a miracle. So I think it played at 2 cinemas or 1 cinema in October, and because we wrapped sort of about in June, I think. And hopefully it's going to be released on Netflix or something. So that happened. And then the other jobs started to start up again. The TV show restarted, I think, in August, and the film was August, September. So we did that as well. And we actually shot that in Sydney, at the same place where we did the Children of the Corn one. So Jane Seymour came out. She got quarantined for 2 weeks. And, we basically got onto it. So that's been good. I had a few Q&As and some coaching stuff just online. Acting classes are back. I'm doing 2 or 3 acting classes a week, and also some private coaching. So, there was a block where it all stopped, and then I think, a testament to how they've handled it over here, things have opened up.
I'm sure most of the listeners are going to know you from a certain trilogy by Peter Jackson.
Yes.
So, big one is, how did you actually get the gig of Bombur?
Well, I hooked up. I've been living in Australia for by that stage. Maybe I'd probably been there for 6 or 7 years, and I knew that it was coming up. And this was a year before it happened. And I remember because my mum and dad were visiting from New Zealand. Yeah, it would have been it would have been 2007, 2008. And I said, look, I'd be interested, shall we hook up again? Because I wasn't with my New Zealand agent at that time. I had an agent in Australia. And she said, yeah. And the reason I did that was because I knew that at the time I was getting, some work in Australia, but I wasn't really getting to the big casting directors. And Anne Robinson cast for that over in Australia. And I thought, I reckon I have a better chance of getting the role in New Zealand as a Kiwi.
Yeah.
So I hooked up with Lizard, and then, then it came around, and suddenly an audition happened. And she said, look, there's one. And I told her, I said, look, if I get one, I will fly over. I'll fly myself over, which I did. So I flew myself over because I wanted to get in front of the casting director. And Miranda Rivers was casting in Auckland for Liz Mullane, who's the Pete's main casting director.
Yeah.
So I flew over, did my audition, and then, went and visited my parents for a few days. But they had no idea I was based in Sydney. And when they found out, they were like, oh, we could have got you in a room over here. But I was like, no, I wanted to get in the room. And I also wanted to get hired as a Kiwi because, well, basically we're cheap. We're a lot cheaper. And everyone laughs, but it's actually quite true. And I knew that they were quite keen to cast Kiwis. And at that stage, I think by that time, Guillermo del Toro had left. So it was always going to be Pete. This was in June. And then I heard nothing for 3 months. And then September rolled around and I got a phone call. And apparently Pete has a system where it's either green light, yellow light, red light. Green light, just and hire them. Yellow light, yeah, we might put them through recalls. Red light, no. And apparently I got green lit straight away. So
that's fantastic.
I got dressed up in all these crazy rags because a few years earlier, my mate of mine, Nigel Saunders, who's from Kent, and it was quite funny because he lives in Kent, but I met him at American accent classes. And even now, he talks like this. Hey, Steve, we should go and do this run, shouldn't we? And he's all like, oh yeah, we're really excited. And we did this thing called the City to Surf, and we got dressed up like Braveheart warriors. Yeah. And so I had this costume as us doing Braveheart warriors, running 14 kilometers with face painted blue. He'd jump on a bridge and do the whole speech. And I found out he went commando the whole time. That was something I found out later, thankfully. Also, if you're ever going to do the City to Surf, don't stop at a pub on the way to have a midi because that definitely does hinder your performance. But anyway, so I had this costume and my friend, he got scissors to it and ripped it up. And then I had my hair long and I had my hair or whatever. And a friend of mine, this Israeli guy who was just really focused, he's a personal trainer as well. And he said, go for a run. So I ran down the hill and up again to the bus stop next to the casting room. And I almost passed out. But I put my jacket on, walked into the room, and she goes, oh, Steve, how are you? And I go, good. And then I took my jacket off and I could see this look on her face. I thought, that's either really good or really bad. And I did a take, and we all auditioned for Gloin in a Scottish accent.
Yeah.
It was a generic dwarf audition. And I did that, and she goes, pull it back a bit. I was excited. I probably was too loud. She goes, remember, it's camera, pull back. Okay, yeah, cool. Second take, done. That was it. But I remember sitting in the waiting room on the way out, coming out and seeing a guy with a script in his hand, reading through the lines. And like, to me, that's something you get. I didn't have a script in my hand because I knew it so well. And that's how prepared you have to be for these. But I remember walking out and a friend of mine was working for the casting place. And I remember just falling on the floor, exhausted from just the mental preparation and, flying countries to do an audition. But I remember leaving going, I reckon I'm in with a shot here. Anyway, yeah. Fast forward 3 months later, get the call, you've been, given the role of Bombur. And I was like, oh, cool. That's the fat one, right? Yeah, excellent. I thought I'd get that one. And that was it, really.
So how was it actually on set working with Peter and working with all these other, got Martin Freeman, Richard Armitage, all these different fantastical actors. And again, Peter Jackson, one of the most accomplished directors of the last 30 years. How was it for you personally?
It took a while to get used to it. I remember that when we first arrived, we all stayed at the Museum Hotel, which is a nice hotel, so close to the water in Wellington. And we all went out for dinner. And my family were there because when we traveled, the day we traveled, it was like 13th of January, we flew over 2011, and my daughter was 10 weeks old. So I moved my whole family and the 10 week, it was crazy. And then we're at the hotel and, the girls settled, obviously they had a, early night, and I went out for dinner with the boys, and we went to this great, I think it was called Chow's or something like that, and Mr. Chow's or something like that. And I remember sitting like next to Martin and then across from Richard, and just like a little bit of, a lot in awe of that. And then when we first started, I was quite panicked. I was like, geez, I'm with some really big hitters there. But it soon became apparent that great actors as they were, I got the feeling, no, I've got this, I belong here. And it took a little while, but then after that, it just all blended in. And it's interesting, the way we shot it was obviously, chronologically. I mean, apart from the first thing they shot was the Riddles in the Dark scene with Andy. And the reason they did that was because Andy went on to direct second unit. So they needed to get that done first. But apart from that, everything was chronological. So we started in Bag End, and, in the story, that's when everyone meets and they get to know each other. Some may have met before, some may not have, but this is us all meeting each other as actors as well. So it was really nice how it grew along the way. But I remember sitting there with Adam Brown, because Adam was the other one who was just like, couldn't believe it. And he was like, he goes, I'm just waiting for the real Adam Brown to turn up. Maybe they got the wrong one. And I'm like, well, I'm sure. And I felt the same. And then Ian turned up as Gandalf, and I was like, oh, there's Gandalf, and that's when shit got real pretty much. Yeah. And yeah, it was cool. And then sort of it just, I don't know, just rolled on. We just carried on. I mean, we had pre-production for a lot longer because Pete was quite ill. And so it delayed for about 6 weeks. We were meant to start in January. We didn't start till start of March. So yeah, it was, and then because of that, we were working 6-day weeks to start with, and it was pretty full on, so it was amazing. And, just meeting those guys, and, I'm very close to a lot of them now, I always will be.
I imagine so, yeah.
Still keep in touch then?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was in the UK a couple of years ago, and I went and had dinner with Jimmy, because we got on really well. We were there, we were brothers, so we sort of had a connection. So, and he loved rugby and wine like myself. So I probably keep in touch with, I guess, Jed, who's in New Zealand, but mainly probably Graham McTavish, Graham and Adam. Over two I keep up. I mean, Dean every now and then, but Dean's a bit of a recluse. He's got his photography business and a new baby. Well, not new anymore, probably a couple of years old now, or a year old. But we still keep in touch. And Jed Brophy and Mark Hadlow did a movie called Blue Moon, like a short film that won some awards, and they came to Sydney a couple of years ago. And I remember I said, look, I'll pick you up. I'll take you for a tour around the Bondi and Eastern Beaches. And honestly, it was just like we'd seen each other the day before, and that's the kind of connection that will never leave us. And also, and we did conventions. We did HobbitCon for about 3 years in a row in Germany too. So that was, always a good catch up in Bonn.
That's so cool. Something that, because obviously we're film students, film and VFX students, we're really interested in how the films were made. So for you, obviously The Hobbit was a very visual effects heavy film. It was heavy CG. How is that compared to smaller productions? I've seen Jimbo the Romantic. That was a class little short film you did. But how does it compare going between The Hobbit and stuff like Jimbo the Romantic?
I can't remember. I think I got sent the link to that. I have where did you see that? I've never seen that out anywhere. One
of our researchers found it, and I was absolutely smitten with it. It's a right laugh of a film.
Yeah, well, I did that with wow, that's John Michael Mooney who directed that, and actually the girl on that, Lara Lightfoot, who I've sort of known around the traps. She was actually doing some. She cast me for this movie, or she was the casting director when I did my first tape for that. So that's crazy. Look, I think it's the scale, and The Hobbit. That was the first proper film I'd actually done. I'd done little bits, but I've done TV stuff. But first proper film job. So I didn't really know any different. And so, of course, afterwards, I was like, oh, I see, because it had a ridiculous budget.
Yeah.
But with the effects, obviously, they build massive sets. So the great thing was we could see all the stuff of Rivendell. We were on the mountain. so they had the basic set and then obviously just expanded. Like we were walking over those rickety things with all the real fire in the Goblin Caves. All that was quite real. And then, things like that. We never saw the dragon, for instance. That was a big secret.
Oh.
So we were going, oh, there's the dragon, whatever that looks like, we'd kind of have to make it up, So a lot of the effects were really good. I mean, one of the first ones we did, which was really interesting, was the first Bag End scene when we were all in Bag End set and Ian was on the green screen. And I think it was well documented at the time that he got quite upset because he wasn't working with real actors and he couldn't. I think they had coloured lights for each actor, but then he was like, you do realise that I'm colourblind. So then they put little faces on tennis balls. That was really challenging for him. But the reason they did that, and Pete explained it later, it was that was our first day shooting, and we didn't get one single shot on the first day because they go, let's come back the next day, and we got it. Then we got some more. But that scene where because Adam would walk through Gandalf, so that they'd have to time it, and it was so the choreography was really detailed. And the reason he did that was he was like, I want to set up the scale of all these characters really early, like set it up with one big set piece, and then we can cheat it later on. And it just made complete sense to me. It was like, well, that's, like in people's minds, they get the idea. And then, of course, the green screen was used a lot of times because they'd have the set they'd be filming and we'd be looking at a green screen. Like I remember there was one particular time we were, we'd go around the bend. It was after the wogs were chasing us and we had to squeeze through that little, all those rocks.
Yeah.
My ladle was actually too big and it wouldn't fit through.
Wow.
That's the real version there. And that's I didn't this is the heavy version, so I didn't carry that at the time. That's one that was made for me and given to me on my last day. But it was, they had to cut it back. But anyway, we come around the corner, he goes, and there you see Rivendell, and we walk around and go, oh, there's Rivendell. Big green screen. And then fast forward about 6 months later or 8 months later, and we're on a boat. And this whole studio was like a massive swimming pool, and we're on a boat. And I think we're either going to Lake Town or could have been the Lonely Mountain. And he says, you look around and he goes, oh, there's a Lonely Mountain. Same green screen. Jimmy Nesbitt's right behind me and he goes, looks just like Rivendell. Yeah, it was interesting because, the green screen really says to me, and like as an acting coach as well, I do a lot of self-tapes, I do a lot of auditioning. And when I'm coaching my clients, it's mainly for auditions because when you're on set, you've got all the setup, you've got your environment, you've got the other actors, you've got a director telling them what to do. But in an audition situation, you've got to make it up. And I studied Meisner, and one of the keys to Meisner that I always tell people, it's like being truthful in imaginary circumstances. So when we see something, we use our imagination, and we actually have to see it in our minds and have a natural reaction rather than manufacture a way to react to things. So it was a really good exercise in doing that and just having real reactions at the time,
And where did you go to an acting college or what was it? How did you learn to act? Or was it just like a thing from when you were a kid?
Well, it started off like that. I think when I was about 10 years old, I started doing, drama, and we did little plays. I did every play at school, and through intermediate school, through the high school. I was I think one of the leads in third form, which is the first year of high school, in college. And then all the way through, I did plays. I did like 2 or 3 in my last year of high school, which is why my grades just plummeted. So I was doing that, and then I got into radio. So yeah, I'd always wanted to. And then, I sort of went into radio, and I was like a radio producer, like audio producer. And that's why I still do a lot of that now. And voiceover and radio announcer, and I was in sports. And then about 24, I think I was, 20, maybe 24, 25, I got promoted as a radio station manager. Might have been 27. I was quite young. And I went through to about 2 or 3 radio stations. And when I was at the last one, I was like, this is not what I want to do. I really want to be an actor. So I left a cushy job, did night audio production for the radio company I work with in Auckland, did some more acting classes with Alona Rogers, who was in an Australian TV show called The Sullivans, and another lady who was amazing called Terry Diarth, which is funny because her name, it just says death, right? But Diarth. And, but she was incredible also. And then I got an agent and I just started to do work there. That was about 98, I think, when I started to do that kind of stuff. And then, I sort of turned 30, did some more acting stuff. got divorced or split up from my partner, my wife at the time in Auckland, and just moved to Sydney. And I thought, I got a job in radio for Triple M, and and then I went to the Actors Centre in Sydney, just doing a part-time every Saturday because I was working full-time, and then joined the Actors Pulse, which is basically a Meisner-based thing, and did that for about 100 years, must have been 5 or 6 years. And while I was doing that, I got the Hobbit. So it's kind of like being an ongoing thing. And then after I finished the Hobbit, I left my agent, who was also my voice agent, and I got a really good agent, which I'm with Marquee now, which is one of the the top agents, quite an exclusive agency in Sydney, and that got me to the next level. But the funny thing was, when I left and before I got the Hobbit, I was doing like little what we call 50-worders or supportive guest roles, just little ones. Then boom, this like $500 million movie. Well, and the rest, they spent a lot more than that. But it was a massive show. So what was missing was all the credits in between. So since I've been back, I've sort of started small, and I've been sort of building on where I started from, but with the added advantage of, I wasn't offered work after the Hobbit. I wasn't, but it kind of got me my agent, and it got me into some other rooms. But I've had to work harder, and I've certainly improved. Like between finishing the Hobbit and now, like the level that I'm working at, just as an actor, is just unrecognizable. And I've just had to do it. So,
On the subject of the Hobbit again, like I think it's very clear, especially for myself, like I'm one of your Patreons, how much the fans like adore Bombur. Like Bombur is like he's adored by the entire fan base of the Hobbit. So like how have you felt like like connecting with those fans and enjoying that?
Oh, I think it's been amazing. And whether it be through conventions, I mean, I mentioned earlier we did HobbitCon 3 years in a row. So they flew us to Germany, put us in a hotel with all our mates. I mean, like, but it was always at home as I got to work, hardly. And I've done every convention in Australia. They have Supernovas is the big one, and Oz Comic Con. And I've done each of them probably about a dozen times. So, and also Patreon, I enjoy that. And to me, there's worse things that you could do is communicate and hang out with people who really love what you do. There's a lot of negative stuff that you could be subject to, and a lot of people aren't into it. A lot of people don't like that, and if they don't, then don't do it. But my philosophy has always been to just make people's day. Just don't be a dick. Essentially, is the golden rule. Just be nice to people. They really appreciate what you do. Take that appreciation. And sure, it's been a great supplementary income doing conventions or Patreon. I mean, I don't make a lot out of Patreon, but I mean, it's that kind of thing is a way to communicate. And there's an audience there. So, I mean, I've been trying to get some of my mates on to do like live group calls. There's another sort of outlet called Jemmy, which has just started up in the States, and we could do like a live group thing, but it's trying to it's like herding cats sometimes. So I've taken it upon myself to generate that. So I've been doing that with my, with the fan business, with my coaching business, and also just recently I've just launched a website for my little studio. I can just do basic, sound recording stuff. So, it's one of those things as an actor, you have to have a lot of other stuff set up because you're not always going to be acting, and you don't want to be like desperate for money for the work. So I try and keep busy and keep the rent paid with all my other work. And then when the acting work comes in, it's a bonus,
Okay, so now we're going to go on to our story time segment, which is really just reminiscing about the good times before COVID. Just, enjoying stories from the past. And with Stephen here today, we're going to have a little chat about the barrel riding scene in the Hobbit, Desolation of Smaug. So, Stephen, how was it basically getting paid to play in a water park for 2 weeks?
Oh, it was brilliant. And the thing was, I'm sure people realize there were so many different sections of it. The only time we were in the actual river was at the very end when we were coming out of the barrels. That was the time where that was the Pelorus River. And we had to shoot that over a couple of days because there was a big storm and the river rose and it took away all the scaffolding. So we were basically floating down the river in these big wine barrels, which had this huge metal ballast in them to keep them upright, and then a big tractor tire or, inside them to keep us afloat. And I remember looking at mine, and then there was bubbles. I thought it was one of the stunties, skin divers, but it had a leak. I mean, it didn't make any difference, but we'd go upwards and then they'd chuck us on a, like a dinghy or in tinny and drive us back up the river, and then we'd float back down again. A couple of times they escaped. I think John Callan and William Kircher escaped a couple of times. They got through the safety barrier. I don't know where they ended up, but I'm sure they came out okay. But one of the instructions that Pete gave us was, when you come out of the barrels, you need to come out backwards, because if you come out forwards, it's too difficult. And me having the biggest costume anyway, of course, I come out forwards. I don't know why, I just did. And then Graham and Jed and Adam, I think, had to try and get me out and were pulling me out of the barrel. I just completely made a meal of it. Didn't follow instructions, completely stuffed the whole thing. But that moment is actually in the film, and it's hilarious because they're trying to pull me out of the barrel. Maybe I subconsciously knew that. So like that was such a fun day. And, it was just, like I say, theme park ride. A lot of the other part was filmed in a studio in Trentham, which was an old army base. And it was like a big go-kart track you get at the, at the fair or at the shows. And it was all water, and there was 2 massive V8 engines either side driving it. And we just went round and round and round and round. And they had all the rocks, all the set rocks around it. And they'd change the set. They'd put the grill up for that gate when we were stuck there. And they just shot all these different angles. And there was a big tip bucket, like this massive tip bucket that Pete would just randomly tip onto someone, which was, I guess, simulating the rapids or the really rough water. So we did that for a good couple of weeks. And then the other stuff was, this wasn't me, but sometimes I'd put the barrels on shopping trolleys, and it was on the green screen in the studio, and they like doing the Fred Flintstone walking with these barrels on shopping trolleys. So there was that as well. And the moment with my character where after the big fight, which none of that, all that fight was all computer generated. When I hop in there the wrong way and then they pull me up backwards, that was my barrel on this like cantilever, and they tipped it, and they tipped me into a big bucket, and then Graham and Jed lifted me out of this bucket that was all on green screen. So there were so many different elements to that. And then, of course, that they chucked a GoPro on a barrel and sent it down the Hooker Falls in Taupo. So that was in there as well. So, the elements of that scene were numerous. And I think with my fight scene, there was a couple of looks, maybe 2 seconds at the front and 3 seconds at the end, and the rest was computer generated. And I saw that very early on in the piece, and that was something that Pete was really keen to put in very early on. But it was great for my character.
Yeah, I mean, it's straight up Bombur's probably most badass moment in the trilogy. Like, when he bursts out, when you burst out of the barrel, weapons akimbo, like, I know, and I really wanted to do that, but I think they got Marky Lee, my stunt double, to do that. So I was probably having lunch. I was probably having lunch with the boys at the time. But I can see now, especially when they do digitals or stunt doubles, when guys are on talk shows and they show this big stunt movement, and then the actor just goes, that means they weren't there. But they don't want to say.
You prefer practical effects or more visual effects, or a mixture of both?
I think it depends. Like, obviously it's great having practical effects if we're there. As an actor, it's a lot more interesting. But I know Pete, as a director, he did a lot of stuff, especially once they announced they were doing 3 movies. Like the Azog character obviously changed. Manu Bennett played that. We never met Manu. He came in later, and he did all his on the green screen. Oh, he did all his, in the mocap room. That was all motion capture. But Pete, with his camera, he could guide and he could see what was happening on the monitor. Say, like the Goblin, when they were going in and out the Goblin caves, there's things that you can do on a mocap stage that you just can't do practically. So, on location, incredible, some of the stuff they can do. They had a unit with a helicopter with a big camera unit on that with all the big sweeping wide shots. So I just think a mix, practical is always easier to work with because you know what you're doing. I think there's been a move back to practical. Maybe I know Pete pushed the envelope with 48 frames, and a lot of visual effects. Some have moved back to practical. So I guess it's what really works, and what your budget's like as well. I mean, the fact that Pete's got one of the best digital companies in the world in his, backyard helps as well.
It's so cool.
I was going to say, have you done any motion capture work at all? Or is it just, have you ever done any of that?
No, I haven't. And I've always wanted to. I know Graham worked in LA on Uncharted, the game. And I went to Naughty Dog Studios in Culver City, and one of the big studios I've got set up there with their mocap stuff. And yeah, I was always interested in doing that and being part of it. And one of the guys who was in Uncharted, a guy called Nolan North. If you're into gaming, you'd know Nolan.
Yeah.
And he's the man of 1,000 voices. One of the funniest men I've ever met. He's so funny. And his son Cooper North is going to be a star as well. But Nolan's always like, oh, I'm going to get you over here and get you in a suit. And yeah, but I just haven't had that opportunity. I always wanted to do stuff with, with Weta if possible. I was trying to go visit the Imaginarium in London when we were over there for the premiere. It just never. I was trying to get hold of Andy, but it just never worked out. Everyone had a lot of stuff on. So yeah, I'd like to, but I haven't as yet.
So would you ever work for do game stuff or?
Oh, totally. And I think the gaming industry, especially in LA, is almost bigger than the film industry. There's a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of good money in it. So I'd definitely do that. I've auditioned for quite a lot of animated films and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's as much of that in Australia. But yeah, that's certainly, I'd be up for that if it came
That's the
about.
thing, isn't it? With being an actor, you can utilize, not just, the physical performance. You have being a vocal actor, you have so many different options as opposed to just being in films and television.
Yeah, and before I did The Hobbit, I was doing 5 voiceovers a week, radio or TV voiceovers, a lot for New Zealand. The industry's changed a bit now. A lot of guys aren't getting as much because the lower end and online, and it's just the whole landscape of voiceover work has kind of changed. But I'm doing audio books. I can record them myself, going direct to the States. So yeah, voice work is another thing. And I also do voiceover coaching and do demos for people. So, it's all about, I guess, it was a great quote by Wayne Gretzky, the hockey legend, who always said, don't follow the puck. You need to follow where it's going to end up. And in this industry, it's trying to, I built the studio well before COVID, and having a home studio has just been, it was amazing because no one was going into studios. And especially with such a fickle industry like acting, having a few things on the go at the same time, one's up, the other's down, but you're always generating some sort of income. I've got a family, schools to pay for, all that kind of stuff like normal people. So, Of
course, yeah. Okay, so that's all we've got time for today. Stephen, thank you very much for coming on today. Really appreciate it. And it's very early over in Australia for you. Is there any words of encouragement, about returning to normality eventually from the COVID situation for the viewers?
I just think that we as humans, we're very resilient, and there's always, as much as there's challenges that come out of it, there's always opportunities that come out of it as well. And I just think looking ahead, that this will all be over soon. Sometimes it may not feel like it, but it will be over, and things will alter. And just keep pressing on and just keep chasing stuff, because I think a lot of it is mindset. It's being able to create, and sometimes it's very hard to create when we're focusing on the challenges that we've got. But in other times, that's an opportunity when we can't do certain things to focus on others, like online businesses. My online coaching business, theactorscoach.com.au, is really flown, and also my Actors Coach Patreon page. So there's always different things that are going to, come up for different people. And I think the other and really important thing is just keep talking, keep in dialogue with people, because conversations running around in our head sometimes, that can be not as productive. if there's stuff to say, just keep in communication. And again, we've discovered that in this age where we can't get close, Zoom with a whole group of people, there's a lot of opportunities that maybe we didn't see that were right in front of us to keep in touch with people and just to keep talking. So, yeah.
And that's all we've got time for today. Thank you very much to Stephen for joining us. Please follow him on Instagram at StephenJHunter1 and take a look at his Patreons, Stephen Hunter. And if you're looking for a bit of acting experience, The Actors Coach. Well, yeah, that's about it, guys. Thank you very much. And see you all in the next episode. Bye-bye.